In the shadowy corridors of history, where time itself is entombed, there exists a captivating enigma that transcends the boundaries of mortality, the ancient art of mummification. Mummification is the term for the techniques the ancient Egyptians employed to embalm or cure the dead corpse. The Egyptians used unique procedures to completely eliminate all fluids from the body, leaving only a dry form that was resistant to deterioration. According to their beliefs, it was crucial to maintain the deceased in a way that made it seem as natural as possible. They were so effective that even now, we can see an Egyptian's mummified corpse and get a decent picture of what that person looked like 3,000 years ago. For the most part of early Egyptian history, mummification was a common practice. Prehistoric mummies were most likely unintentional creations. Some remains buried in small holes cut into the sand were fortunately preserved by the dry air and sand of Egypt, where there is seldom any discernible rainfall. During the 4th and 5th dynasties, about 2600 BCE, Egyptians most likely started purposefully mummifying their deceased. The custom persisted and evolved for more than 2 millennia, reaching the Roman era. Depending on the cost, mummification quality varies within a certain time period. The mummies of Tutankhamun and other well-known pharaohs are among the finest prepared and kept. They are from the 18th through the 20th dynasties of the New Kingdom. This description will focus on the overall procedure of this time frame. The process of mummification required 70 days. As embalmers, special priests prepared and wrapped the bodies. In addition to being familiar with the appropriate prayers and ceremonies to be offered at different times, the priests also need a thorough understanding of human anatomy. Eliminating any interior components that may quickly deteriorate was the first stage in the procedure. To remove the brain, tiny pieces of brain tissue were delicately extracted by passing special hooked devices up through the nose. It was a risky procedure that may have resulted in facial disfigurement. The organs of the chest and abdomen were then removed by the embalmers via an incision that was often done on the left side of the abdomen. Since they thought the heart to be the source of all wisdom and existence, they only left the heart intact. The stomach, liver, lungs, and intestines were preserved individually and were kept in particular boxes or jars that are now known as canopic jars. They were interred beside the mummy. Subsequent mummies underwent treatment, wrapping, and internal replacement of their organs. Nevertheless, the funeral custom continued to include the use of empty canopic jars. Next, the embalmers dried out the corpse completely. They achieved this by putting more natron packets within the body and coating the body with natron, a salt kind with excellent drying qualities. The embalmers took out the inside sachets and gave the corpse a quick wash to eliminate the natron once the body had dried fully. The end product was a very desiccated but identifiable human shape. Sunken portions of the corpse were filled in with linen and other materials, and fake eyes were placed on the mummy to give it an even more realistic appearance. The wrapping process then started. It took hundreds of yards of linen to cover one tomb. The lengthy linen strips were expertly twisted by the priests around the body. Sometimes they would even wrap each finger and toe individually before encircling the complete hand or foot. Prayers and magical phrases were inscribed on some of the linen strips, and amulets were placed amid the wrappings to protect the deceased from harm. Between the layers of head bandages, the priests often positioned a mask covering the patient's face. The shape was covered with heated resin at various points, and the wrapping process restarted. Finally, the priests put the last shroud or garment in place and tied it with strips of linen. The mummy had been finished. Not everyone was as busy as the priests getting the mummies ready at this time. Even though the process of preparing a tomb was often started well in advance of the deceased person's passing, there was now a deadline, thus laborers, artisans, and craftsmen worked rapidly. The tomb needed to have a lot of items that a person would need in the hereafter. Wall murals of religious or everyday themes were painted, furniture and statuettes were ready, and lists of foods to eat or prayers were completed. These drawings, lists, and models would magically materialize into the genuine thing when required in the afterlife. The funeral was coming up, and everything was set. At the entry to the tomb, at the beginning of the burial process, priests carried out a series of specialized religious rituals. The most important aspect of the event was without a doubt the opening of the mouth, which served as the event's focal point. By stroking certain parts of the mummies with a particular instrument, a priest was able to open those parts of the body to the sensations that are necessary in the hereafter and that are enjoyed in this life. After the gadget was placed in the mouth of the dead individual, they were able to communicate and consume food. As at this moment, he was ready to go on his journey to the afterlife. The chamber where the burial took place was enclosed by a wall, and the mummy was placed within his coffin. It is possible that the Egyptians had a profound concern about death, as seen by the elaborate burial rituals they practiced. On the other hand, because of the strong love that they had for life, they decided to begin making arrangements for their death at an early age. As a result of the fact that there is no life that can be compared to the one that they are now enjoying, they wanted to ensure that it would continue after they had died away. In any case, why should the corpse be preserved? People in ancient Egypt believed that the mummified body had a soul or spirit that lived inside it. If the body is destroyed, it is possible that the soul will be gone. The notion of spirit was difficult to grasp, and it was composed of three spirits in particular: the Ak, the Ba, and the Ka. It was vital for the Ka, who was a double of the person and would remain in the tomb, to have the sacrifices and objects that were contained inside it. There was no restriction on the soul or Ba's ability to fly out of the tomb and back in again. In addition, in order to get to the final judgment and the door to the afterlife, the Ak, which may be interpreted as spirit in a more general sense, was required to go through the underworld. The Egyptians relied on all three of these things. After their deaths, the pharaohs of Egypt were often mummified and buried in elaborate tombs where they were buried. Those who were members of the nobility, officials, and even plain people were often subjected to the same punishment. On the other hand, the treatment was very expensive and beyond reach for a lot of people. In addition, several animals were rendered mummified for the sake of religious practice. There was a cemetery at Saqqara that was devoted to the sacred bulls that were produced throughout the early dynasties. In particular, during the later dynasties, the technique of mummification was sometimes carried out for animals that were considered to be of major religious significance. These creatures included baboons, cats, birds, and crocodiles. It is possible that the writing and other specialists. The breakthroughs that have been made in X-ray technology have made it possible to X-ray mummies without causing any damage to the delicate outer coverings that they have. It is via the examination of X-rays on remains that have not been wrapped that specialists are obtaining a deeper understanding of the ailments that the Egyptians suffered from and the methods that were used to cure them. An examination of the bones provides a more accurate representation of the average height and length of lifespan. Having knowledge of the ages at which the Egyptian rulers passed away may provide some insight into the historical sequence and chronology of the Egyptian monarchs. By observing the striking similarities and contrasts that exist between the skulls of consecutive pharaohs, it is possible to deduce even the degree of kinship that existed within the royal line. There is still communication between the mummies and us, even after thousands of years have passed. If you found this video as enthralling as the whispers of the past, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.